Okay.
I'm Batman.
Okay.
I am not going anywhere.
I'm not leaving.
Welcome to our trash revolution.
Live from the Poly Market Studio in LA. It's the Young Turks.
Drop it. Welcome one and all to, I was going to say the damage report, probably because it's me and you and it feels like a Monday. But no, it is the Young Turks. It is a power panel.
Wow.
Francesca Fiorentini joins us. You're powerful, don't get me wrong. But there's only two of us.
There is.
And I'm gonna keep it real. Us not having the audio of the power panel thing, it lacks power. I think I'm going to be drained of energy for the rest of the show, so I hope you can bring it because I won't.
Nope, we're gonna bring it real. We're gonna bring it like Biden's press conference.
So we're gonna be a master class.
Anyway.
Welcome. Thank you for being here, particularly because I know Friday's a big day for the Bitchuation Room, which Francesca, of course, hosts. Look it up. It's available all over the place and on Patreon. But anyway, very glad to be here because this is our final day before the big RNC week.
You're so lucky.
So lucky to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a great place to be killed. So that'll be fun. And look, next week we're gonna have a nominee on the Republican side. We might have a new nominee on the Democratic side. Change is a brewing, and so I'm super excited for that. But in addition to, obviously, we're gonna be talking about Joe Biden, we're gonna be talking about Donald Trump. We're also gonna be talking about Rudy Giuliani, who got some bad legal news today. And a little bit more besides. There's some union fights brewing too as we get towards the RNC. So a lot of exciting stuff out there. Thank you, Francesca, for joining us. You ready to do this thing?
Absolutely.
Okay, then in that case, we shall do it. Joe Biden has had his big press conference, which was pitched in a variety of different ways. Some people called it like the big boy press conference, where he was gonna answer questions that weren't provided to those asking him. Some people said it was make or break. This is what's gonna determine if he stays in this thing. Well, coming out of it, some people think that he did an amazing job. Some people think he did the best job that has ever been done. And some people not necessarily buying it. So we're gonna run through all of those, but let's start off with those whose praise was most effusive.
First, just your impressions of the president tonight.
Listen, I think he was clear. I think he was strong. And really, Chris, he put on a masterclass in terms of complex international foreign policy. This guy has been the most transformational, most consequential president that I've seen in my lifetime. When you think about what he has been able to do, what he has been able to accomplish, there really is no comparison. He sort of hinted at maybe LBJ and FDR. Democrats, we got to stop the hand wringing. We got to stop the woe is me and understand that our guy is much better, leagues better than the other side.
I will grant Harrison that. Yes, he is leagues better. The issue is that might well not be enough for the voters, but I will agree with him. I think that he is a transformational figure. I think you just need to look at like 2020 to today, and clearly some sort of transformation has happened. Done. But anyway, yeah. So look, obviously, head of the DNC, big fan of that. Let's turn now to Lawrence O'Donnell, who was also incredibly impressed.
What followed
was nothing less than the most masterful, televised presidential press conference about foreign policy. There have been other presidential press conferences that have exhibited mastery at different points by some presidents, but on foreign policy, complex foreign policy, involving the Middle East and the situation in Ukraine, this is as good as it gets.
Okay, so they are very much on board. Look, I think it is fair to say that if you were hoping that this would be a repeat of the debate, hoping because that would clarify the situation and force the Democrats to take action, I don't think this was like the debate. I mean, we're gonna get to the mistakes he made, but he wasn't routinely shutting down. He showed, an understanding the material. I'm not entirely, I believe there was a teleprompter for the speech part, but even once they got to the questions, aside from some flubs, he understood where he was and what was going on largely in the world. That said, this is the best it's ever been. It could never be better. That feels overly defensive. I'm trying to be fair here. Francesca, what's your read of this?
Yeah, it could never get better. This is the best we'll ever get, which actually reminds us that we are in a sad state in American politics. And even when it comes to our foreign policy, if you ask me, just look at what is happening in Gaza and the inability to reach a ceasefire. I mean, John, honestly, I watched the entire press conference, and I have to say, I was surprised. I thought he was good. He was good. He was able to get out a thought. And my second thought after good, he was able to get out his thoughts was on his best day, after being whispered the answers in his ear, there's no way Donald Trump could have answered a fraction of the questions that Biden did in terms of like NATO specific policy, in terms of the specific inner workings around Ukraine, around Israel. Like there's just, he doesn't have the attention span, nor does he care. So that immediately was struck. And I hope, folks who are like really mad at us for asking Biden to please step aside will remember that no, Donald Trump is far worse. But I still don't think that it is compelling enough for the American people, especially those who are really concerned about one of the biggest foreign policy blunders that he's had, which is the inability to reach a ceasefire with Israel and to stop this ongoing genocide for everyone involved. And that's a major reason why a lot of young people, people of color, are staying away and are really disenchanted, and certainly aren't gonna make calls for Joe Biden this time around.
Yeah, and look, again, I think you might have been on the show when I talked about this. Like, we're routinely making everybody mad, being attacked from simultaneously both sides. That's the brand of TYT. It's always been the case. It always will be the case. But I know that we're supposed to just be frothing at the mouth Biden haters, but I'm not gonna be that cartoon character. I apologize. Other than maybe the hair. No, yes, he was fine. He's absolutely fine, and Trump could never. I mean, those things are obviously the case. So to all of there's 50,000 people writing op-eds right now. Why aren't we talking about Trump being bad? Well, first of all, because America has literally never talked about anything more than about how bad Trump is. He's really bad. We all know it, and we will continue to talk about it. Trump could not. He would have been asked a question about NATO, and he would have talked about sharks attacking people or something. Everybody understands that. Biden was better. Would have been great if he had been like that at the debate. That would have been wonderful. Can't we all agree that would have been better? But anyway, I want to dive into some of the minutia, because you saw in the previous clip Lawrence O'Donnell saying that it's never been as good as it is right now. So let's take a look at how that came about in practice. So here's a question that Biden was asked.
The NATO declaration that was issued yesterday was very notable because it described China as a decisive enabler of the war in Ukraine for its provision of critical goods to the Russians. So I'd be interested to know whether you have a strategy now of trying to interrupt the partnership between China and Russia, and whether or not in a second term you would pursue that, if you could describe that strategy to us. And along the way, could you also tell us whether you think, just to follow up on Felicia's question, that if you were in a room with Vladimir Putin again, the way you were 3 years ago, or with President Xi that a few years from now, you will be able to go negotiate with them, handle them one-on-one.
Okay, so I think that's a good setup of a test for Joe Biden. Though that's multiple questions. He has to remember all of them. They're fairly in depth. Some of them are about a foreign policy situation. Some of them are about what he will personally do. Some of them are about, sort of relating it to what he's already done. So complex question. Here is Biden's answer.
She believes that China is a large enough market that they can entice any country, including European countries, to invest there in return for commitments from Europe to do A, B, C, or D, or not to do certain things. What's happened is we had a long discussion about what we have to make clear. China has to understand that if they are supplying Russia with information and capacity, along with working with North Korea and others to help Russia in armament, that they're not going to benefit economically.
Okay, so what was there, I think, was fine. I don't know that he really addressed all of the different components of it, but he seemed to understand what he was talking about. And certainly, again, as we've said a million times, if it had been Donald Trump, he would have started talking about Taylor Swift or something. Like, he would not have been able to stay on brand. We all understand that. That said, that answer being the best it's ever been sounds weird. Like, I feel like I think Obama could take him in that respect. I don't think we're being overly harsh in saying that, okay, that was an okay answer, but I don't think, like, cabinet members of his could have provided, I think, a far more compelling and certainly more swiftly delivered answer. I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a fine answer, but again, when he actually is being clear, we can actually hear the substance, and the substance to me seems like there is less of an impetus to work with China or to have any kind of diplomatic light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to Ukraine than there is to just kind of continue fear mongering. Yes, it is less fear mongering than under Donald Trump, absolutely. But it's still there. There's still been a military pivot by the United States in the South China Sea under Biden. There has still been that's just sort of chest thumping. And in terms of Ukraine, look, I believe in Ukrainian sovereignty, and we've seen the crimes that Russia has committed just in the last weeks, right? I mean, it's heinous. But what is the US's role? And for me, this is where Biden needs to be clear to the American people. Getting them lost in foreign policy issues, it doesn't, actually reach folks and where at all, right? It's like he's not speaking to what they care about because there's no top line vision. What's our vision? What's our role for the United States in the world? Do we want to just be the weapons suppliers for these allies and or even no matter how many war crimes they commit, like Israel? Or do we want to be a force for diplomatic solution, cooperation, moving forward on real global challenges like climate change, which necessitates the role of China? If we don't actually work with China, everyone's gonna be underwater in 20 years. So that, I think, is my real thing, is like when he's clear, you still don't get a sense, a vision from him. Trump is just, there's a bunch of mentally unwell, undocumented immigrants running amok inside the United States. And you're like, okay, that's bizarre and untrue, but I see your vision. It's xenophobia.
Yeah, it's definitely a vision. I think it's the vision that you have as Willy Wonka takes you on a boat ride through a tunnel, but it is a vision, okay?
Yes.
It is something. Yeah, and look, he sometimes gets into that a little bit. There's not always a matchup between, I don't know, the way he would pitch America's role in the world with the role we actually play in the world in some conflicts, particularly in Gaza right now. So there's that gap. And I agree. I will say, look, before we move on to some of the mistakes, which we have to get to, I will say this was not necessarily, like if I was on Biden's team and we were like, okay, we had the bad debate and people have been like breathing down our neck. And then we had George Stephanopoulos and that was like, okay, but it didn't go super well. So we're gonna have a press conference that's gonna show his strength of the American people. I think this is not the easiest test in that it's focused on wonky foreign policy when multiple conflicts are going on around the world simultaneously. I think that's a relatively difficult. It would be easier if it was like, we're going to address the recent Supreme Court decision on medication abortion or something. We're going to talk about like maybe a topic that he's more comfortable discussing, although honestly, coming out of the debate, maybe abortion isn't a topic he's super comfortable discussing. I think that this is a slightly harder test. So
I think actually this is his comfort zone. To be, I disagree with you, John. Yeah, I mean, I do think he got some really good points in there about like the economy, and he actually said the words corporate greed, and I was like,
he did.
Yeah, he did. He was like, keep going with that. Let's talk about it. But I do think that really, and so many people, look, it's not just his age. The last 8 months, he's been fueling and funneling money into Israel to commit their crimes in Gaza. I'm sorry to keep harping on it, but it's the reason a lot of people are staying away from the polls and are not energized around this election. And it's so sad that even though he said many, many, many words about his treatment of Israel, and maybe I should have, in hindsight, the question was, what would you have done different? And he was like, well, maybe I should have, I think he didn't even say press the Israelis more, but there was something to that effect of wanting to push them a little bit more. It's like, buddy, cut the purse strings Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, like any day. You can always just withhold not just 2,000-pound bombs, not just 500-pound bombs, but weaponry writ large from what is clearly a massive human catastrophe.
I agree. Well, speaking of catastrophe, let's get to the areas during this press conference in which he came up a little bit short or seemed to be stepping into territory that his team was obviously hoping to avoid. Again, we've already given our overall impression of his performance, but we're gonna be fair, we're gonna be nuanced so that we can be attacked by as many people as possible. So with that said, Paul Begala is a Democratic strategist. Here are his thoughts. He was on CNN with Anderson Cooper talking about the Joe Biden press conference.
I saw substantive mastery. I mean, my goodness, it was a tour de force and a tour of the world. We talk a lot, of course, about NATO and Ukraine, but about China, about Israel, Gaza. He seemed to have the substance really at his command. Stylistically, though, you still had the soft voice. You didn't have the kind of catastrophic failure he had at the debate, but you also didn't have the same sort of command that he had at his inaugural. So the substance was great, the style not. He is already getting static for slipping and saying Vice President Trump, which, anybody could do that, Tucker. You just get a name wrong.
Thanks, James Carville.
Oh, you almost missed that.
Yeah, okay, well, it got weirdly awkward there. Well, let's get into some of those slip-ups that were alluded to and joked about there. So here's the first.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. He's going to beat President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway, Mr. President.
I'm better.
You are a hell of a lot
better. Okay, so as soon as the words go out, I'm sure everyone in the room is like, oh, that's not good. Now he caught it. He realized that he'd made the mistake, which is good. You can make that sort of mistake and not realize it, which is worse. And he corrected it, but then I think that he overcorrected in trying to explain. Oh, the reason I said it was because I'm so focused on Putin. That's probably not why. But he caught it. And there was another very similar sort of slip up. Take a look.
I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president.
I was listening live when I heard that, and I was like, oh no, a Truth Social post is coming from that. Like, I do think it's a thing where, how like it happens very often. I'm sure you do it while you're talking, and certainly while you're listening to me. You're simultaneously doing that, and then you're prepping. You're like, you've got something on the back burner.
Doomsday, yes.
I think his back and front burners are closer now. And so it's easy to bleed over, I think, because in both of those cases, it's not like he said a random name or something, like even as random as saying Nikki Haley instead of Nancy Pelosi. Like what the hell? Those have nothing to do with each other. In this case, they definitely have something to do with each other, but you want to avoid those. And without those couple of things, it would have been a fairly flawless, if not necessarily a masterclass appearance. So those do stand out. But do you think it's fair to focus on those? Is that nitpicking? What do you think?
I don't, John. I disagree that these were big blunders. I just think, I get Trump and Biden.
I'm not saying they're big blunders. I'm saying they stood out.
Yeah, they definitely stood out. But I get Trump and Biden's name confused all the time, but that's also says more about them than it does about me, I think. But also we're forgetting he's old. He's just old.
I did forget that.
And again, and his politics are old and his thinking is old, and we absolutely would have a better chance of defeating Donald Trump if there was just a little bit of reinvigoration into this goddamn campaign. Don't hate me for saying the truth. But yeah, I think I'm a little bit tired of like focusing on just his style, because I think the style is really adjacent to the message. And he actually doesn't really have a good unifying message other than stop Trump, which I know, yes, we all understand that's the biggest message, and actually that's the biggest task. But in order to get people out to the polls, you need something more than that. And he even got rid of Build Back Better by his own goddamn party. Joe Manchin was the one who killed that, right? And it pieced off into different things, the Inflation Reduction Act, the bipartisan infrastructure bill. But again, John, it's like, where's the unifying thing? We built this country back. We're coming back. Like even that, we're coming back. Let's go. We're coming back like an STI.
I'm gonna leave it to the audience to think about what that was the first thing that you thought of. But anyway, yeah, look, and we obviously disagree with different components of it, whatever. But I think that the last couple of weeks have been a reminder that branding does matter. It can be a good thing or a bad thing. Having Build Back Better at least it's a specific thing that you can refer to. Like having Project 2025 is a specific thing that your enemies can refer to. So sometimes it doesn't help. But like his core message generally, and I know this because anytime you're like, hey, are you the best person to beat Trump? He'll start talking about like, we inherited a blah, 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 and we did this and things are getting better. Which that doesn't actually answer the question of whether you're the best person to stop him. Like all of that might be true, but that either it has won over voters or it hasn't. And saying like, are you the best person to beat Trump? And then say, well, we got a lot of challenges coming forward. No, I understand that. That's why I'm asking the question. That's not an answer to the question. That's why the question matters. And those challenges remain, whether it's you or whether it's Harris or Newsom or whatever. So it's like, yes, we've had difficulty in the past. Yes, there are challenges in the future. That's not a specific thing. When he brought up, corporate greed or whatever, like he's been doing that a little bit throughout the year. He's talking about shrinkflation and stuff. That could be sort of encapsulated into a brand. If it was a President Bernie right now, I'm sure that it would be. Like you need something specific more than just, hey, the inflation numbers have been getting better, which they have. It's true. Prices are going down and unemployment's looking pretty good. Like these things are true, but you can't just keep saying the same things because clearly over the last few months, it hasn't been enough. You need to transition to something else. But that said, we're gonna get more into the policy of it in our B block. In the few minutes we have remaining for this though, I wanna turn to the response, not from like MSNBC or CNN, but from Fox News. Here's what they had to say, I believe, over on Fox and Friends.
I think he did fine. I thought he did fine.
That's right, I'm telling you.
If this was just a press conference, we would have said, oh, look, he made 2 mistakes. All right, but this is the worst possible scenario for Democrats.
Yeah.
Because he didn't blow, like he wasn't clueless. Right. There was no freezing moments. There was no, there was a typical Joe Biden miss-up. Saying that Donald Trump was vice president, obviously terrible, but it's typical of Joe Biden.
Yeah, but again, as we've said, those sorts of things happen. They even happened in right there where Kilmeade said he had a miss-up. I'm sure that's not what he intended to say, but sometimes your tongue gets away from you. But so to the substance of what they said, it's the worst thing that could have happened. Obviously, if it had been the most dynamic speech that we'd ever heard, then that would be a good thing. If it was an absolute disaster, then maybe this thing is done. Instead, it's fine. So they're saying that kind of just continues forward with Biden, but doesn't reassure people. So let's discuss whether we think that's true. But bear in mind, like the right is pretty clear. Some of them are delighting in this. Some of them are trying to hide it while having their cake and eating it too. That a lot of people on the right want it to be Biden. Okay, and if you're a huge fan of Biden, I apologize if it makes you angry to acknowledge that the right wants to run against Joe Biden. That's just what it is. They could be wrong. Maybe we'll prove them wrong and they'll get destroyed in November. But right now, they clearly want it to be Biden. You see it in Donald Trump is going on long screeds attacking George Clooney for questioning Joe Biden. Like, why do you think he's doing that? The Heritage Foundation is planning legal action to stop any states from replacing Joe Biden on the ballot. Why are they going to all that trouble? And I know. reverse psychology. But I don't think that's actually what it is. I think they're looking at the same polls that we are, and maybe they'll be wrong, maybe we'll be wrong. But as of right now, that seems pretty clear. That said, what do you think?
They can't do double reverse psychology. They're only smart enough to master one, John. So the goading Biden to stay is all they can do. I think, yeah, there's no 70 chess happening from the right. They want it to be Biden because they see the polls like we see the polls. They hear him the way we hear him. And they're like, oh, this might be an easier layup than we think. And I think they're right. I mean, look, they have to know people are not switching Biden to Trump. They know that, we know that. I'm just gonna state that for those of you who feel like, I don't know where CNN wheels out the last remaining undecided voters who've been in a coma, and bless them for it for the last 5 years. But no, what's going to happen is there will be low voter turnout. People won't get excited about Joe Biden in the places that it matters and the counties that it matters, and he won't get the electorates that he needs, or and so that's what's gonna happen. And yeah, Jesse Waters on Fox News is essentially going like, poor Biden, my God, he was great. Everyone, shouldn't we love him? Wink, wink. Like they have seen, and this is so funny because they've spent 3 years breathlessly saying that he's a criminal mastermind and he's doing everything behind the scenes and he's weaponizing the Justice Department against Donald Trump and all of his, his foes. And then they're like, oh, he is just as ineffective and kind of unable to express the things that he's been effective in as the Democrats have thought, And so, yeah, we want to stick with him.
Yeah, I mean, look, once Jesse Waters gets involved, then it becomes a little bit obvious. He's obviously physically incapable of sympathy or empathy. So if he's pretending to experience that, there's clearly something leading him to that. But anyway, look, and I've said 1,000 times, do I need to say again to avoid getting the tweets? If it's him, I'll support him, obviously. But it doesn't have to be him, that's all I'm saying.
And I meant electors, okay?
Electors, sure.
I meant President Putin electors.
And as you pointed out, there's probably not gonna be a lot of people switching over as a result of this, but that doesn't mean that the numbers can't change. And I know what some people say, at the end of the day, don't worry, people hate Trump so much that they're gonna come out and vote anyway. Well, but if that is the case, then that does not require Biden.
Yeah.
They'll still hate Trump even if it's Harris. Maybe they'll hate him more, I don't know. Anyway, we're gonna talk more about it on the other side of this break.
Stop the hammering.
Okay, welcome one and all to the trash revolution. Let's jump into some of your comments. Oh, by the way, coming up in the second hour, Yasmin Ali Khan will be leading. Jordan Ewell and Mark Thompson will be joining her. That's gonna be an awesome hour. Definitely stay tuned for that. Let's see, Journeyman the Ceramic Dragon, the members comment says, drop it like the ball the DNC dropped, dun dun. Teddy Cool says, drop it like Biden's donor base. That's a reference, I think, to the $90 million that's being currently held up if he is the nominee. Let's see, Galfar, hey Galfar says in the members' comments, nobody's taking anything away from what Biden has accomplished. What we are worried about is his mental health and if he can continue to do that. If what has been said about the last 2 years is true, then he cannot. Yeah, everybody thinks that if he were to step down, then that's not acknowledging that that the economy improved. No, it did. It's not like if I acknowledge the economy again, his polling goes up. That's just not, these things are not connected, evidently. Anyway, let's see. Kelly K says, both of you are so powerful, you don't need a panel, just the dynamic duo.
Oh.
Thank you. I've said for a long time, if it was up to me, I want TYT to have an answer to Morning Joe, and I want it to be you and me. And I think that would be a lot of fun, but
Okay, but that means we gotta get married, and we're both already married. And then I gotta like look at you longingly. Where are you? And I just have to be like, yeah.
I mean, feel free. I don't think much of that is necessary. They pretended for a long time not to be together. We could do that.
So do we.
Anyway, and the,
sorry,
the tweets and the stories will begin. Okay, let's see. Gabby Maria says, John's hair is nearing the end of its Targaryen phase shift. Should we be scared? Well, look, anytime I'm about to transition to a new haircut, everyone should be worried because 9 times out of 10, it's bad. That said, I'm gonna do what I can. I like the lighter color. I saw a video of me from back before with the dark hair, and I don't recognize myself. Actually, it's weird. So we'll see. Maybe I'll actually dye my hair silver. We'll see. Kind of liking it. I'm liking it. I kind of want to steal Anderson Cooper's brand. Okay, let's jump down. Let's see what's going on over on Twitch. Emil Woods, 1982, gifted 2 subs. Thank you for that. Very nice of you. Franklin Sharp Slicer, hey Franklin, says, Dragon Dad, I'm so glad you keep it perky and not sad. Francesca, how the heck are ya? As Chief Dan George once said, our heart soars like a hawk whenever we hear from you. Well, that's nice. Beautiful little poem there. Okay.
Thank you.
Carpenter's Bride says, 2IT is the only news I watch now. I will accept that if you're including in that TDR and the Bitchuation Room.
Yes.
There you go.
If only. Only and if.
Only if.
And only.
And if not, then no.
Yeah.
No. Okay. And Corey F says, we get the best duo on the internet today. Well, thank you so much. Very nice of you. We're gonna give you a little bit more of that duo on the other side of this break.
Welcome to our trash revolution.
Stop the hammering.
Welcome back, one and all, to the first hour of the Young Turks with me, John Rolla, and Francesca Fiorentini. Francesca, thank you for being here. Everyone go check out the Bitchuation Room. Not like right now, but after.
Sure.
Then you can. Hit the like button if you haven't already, and we're gonna jump into our next topic. Americans are divided on a lot. It might seem at times like everything, but occasionally you find something that we all can agree on, whether you're red or deepest blue. And according to the most recent results from a Pew Research Center poll, there is one thing we agree on. Most Americans are not happy about the situation we're cruising into come November. 2/3 of Americans polled think that both our current options for president are, in their words, embarrassing, which is probably not how you want things to go for like the most advanced democracy in America or in the world. So majorities describe both of them as embarrassing, with identical shares, 63% each, saying this about each candidate. I don't think those should be equal, but that's how it looks right now. 1/3 or more of each candidate's supporters, 37 for Biden, 33 for Trump, say their own candidate is embarrassing. So a lot of this is people on the opposite side of the aisle being embarrassed by the other guy, which is sort of understandable. Think about literally anything Donald Trump has said or done. It's best case scenario embarrassing. Worst case scenario horrifying and fascistic. But anyway, here's some more information from this poll. 87% say that so far the campaign does not make them feel proud of the country. 76% say it's not focused on important policy debates. And 68% describe the campaign as too negative. Which I think that last one's kind of interesting. I'm not sure that this is one of the most negative campaigns ever, partly because right now Trump is being really hands off with Joe Biden. And Joe Biden is being negative towards Trump, I guess. But Joe Biden's the sort of politician that he's never gonna go as hard against a Trump as a lot of other people would. He's like more of that old school sort of we should be polite kind of guy.
Yeah.
So I don't think this is the most negative campaign, but I think a lot of those other negative characteristics can accurately apply to it. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think reality is being more negative to both Donald Trump and Joe Biden than either of them could be against one another. The question is, who is more effective at pointing out that reality? And I think Joe Biden has to point out the reality that Donald Trump is a convicted felon, and that he stole classified documents and kept them home like a show and tell from Mar-a-Lago in his bathroom. I mean, it's endless with this guy, right? There's so many things to hit him on. You can dunk all day. You are LeBron James. There is no one defending you. Go, go, go. And he is unable to do that. And again, Joe Biden's going up against the master of pomp and spin, the master of bluster, right? Say what you about Trump. He is the master of bluster, and all Joe Biden has, he doesn't even have it this time around. He had, will you shut up, man? And now he just has, there's a migrant that raped, what are you doing? But look, the reality is it's embarrassing. It is embarrassing, and this country deserves a lot better than these two candidates, which is why even Republicans know if one of them were to be swapped out, that would be a huge boost to whichever party that was. It's not gonna be the Republicans, unless some kind of divine intervention, as Joe Biden has clearly called for, or unless Biden, takes up the Supreme Court on the whole like immunity for crimes thing. You never know.
King. Maybe make Trump decide in practice between the electrocution and the shark. Just a joke, don't arrest me. Yes.
Trump gets drugged, wakes up in a metal boat. There's a shark. I mean,
a really heavy boat because of the battery. Let's be clear,
yeah.
It's super heavy. Sinking. Yeah, and so look, people are saying it's embarrassing. Some people are probably watching this and saying, well, yeah, but they're not the same. Obviously, come on, do we need to clarify that they're worlds apart? Obviously, they're very different. And by the way, to the Republicans who are delighted in the situation the Dems find themselves in, where like, they're trying to figure out if they can replace him or not. They probably won't be able to. Like, the joke is on you too, because if you actually had the cojones to replace your guy with like a Nikki Haley or whoever, you'd win in a landslide, you doinks, okay? So yeah, glass houses. That said, I want to jump ahead to another aspect of how people evaluate, real fast, what were you gonna say?
Real fast, I will say 78% of those polled say that neither candidate has spoken to the issues that matter to them. That's absolutely right on the money. I mean, the two candidates spent more time discussing their golfing and like which one had more of a handicap than they did about a Palestinian state or about climate change. You saw time and time again them deflect, especially Donald Trump, deflect, but Biden, by the fact that he couldn't get his mouth around the words, deflect on issues that matter to people. And then they just evolved into like, I got a negative, golf stuff.
I
don't know what it sounds
like. Anyway, look, I think that Biden definitely talks more about the economy. And at the debate, he had trouble, but he was trying to talk about inflation and about jobs and about some of the investments and stuff.
He was really good at all the things he wasn't able to articulate, if you ask me.
But in theory, it was good. Meanwhile, Trump talks about one policy. He randomly thought up, what if we didn't tax tips? And now he's running. Let's really fast jump to graphic 6, I believe, because I want to talk about another way that people are evaluating these candidates. So here you see over the last few years, how evaluations of how mentally sharp the candidates are has gone. And you see over gradual decline. I was gonna say accelerating decline. It's only a little bit accelerating. It's been going down for a few years, Joe Biden, whereas Trump's number has gone up. And I think this right here might low-key be the wildest chart I've ever seen in my life. It has to be by comparison. Because if a significant percent think that Trump is sharper than he was, he thinks Hannibal Lecter's a real person who supports him for president. So, and sharks and electrocutions, and do I need to go on with the windmill cancer? And I don't understand how people could possibly think that. Now, that said, there's a little bit of good polling news here for Joe Biden, and that is that in the most recent NPR poll that was just released, I think within an hour before we went live, Biden is actually up over Trump, 50-48. It's within the margin of error, but he's a couple points ahead of where he was in the same poll a few weeks back. So that is good news. And as I've said, I've been watching the polls. There's been bad polling information, particularly in the battleground states for Joe Biden. Some of the national stuff is not as apocalyptic coming out of the debate as I would have predicted and perhaps did predict. That said, he was already doing poorly, and the battleground states are the more important ones. But final thoughts about all this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the polls may even out the longer we go from the debate, and the more dug in Joe Biden becomes, right? And then we all just sort of like, protect him, and that's it. And we go with that. I don't know, John. The battleground states are the only ones that matter. And sadly, again, the way that he got the battleground states, the way that he flipped Georgia, that was all voter turnout. That was voter turnout from young people, from people of color. That was volunteers, that was grassroots organizations who felt energized. They mobilized their bases, they mobilized their people. And what I'm hearing now is that those folks aren't around anymore. They're around, but it's very difficult to get them to make those calls, to mobilize their bases, to get folks out, to write the cards, to and maybe it'll happen. Maybe the operation will come up, come together very, very quickly. But it would not come together as quickly as if there was a candidate with real energy behind them.
Yes, and if it is not clear, and based on me looking at Twitter occasionally, it is not clear. We just do not want Donald Trump to win in November.
Yeah,
we can disagree about the strategy to get there. That is the goal, and that should not be up for debate. Anyway, that said, I think we should take our second break. Come back. We're gonna turn to other news after this.
Windmills, wing.
Okay, everybody, welcome to the social break. Thank you for being here. Dievgo Shomet says in a super chat, when he talks about his record, it always sounds like a eulogy and never a vision for the future. He's like a roommate that finally does the dishes and expects a medal for doing the bare minimum. Matt Gates on a white Ford Bronco says in a super chat, know what happens to men if we call our wife and or kids by names other than their own? We're sent to big boy jail to sleep in our big boy couch. So Biden, get better or shut up or step out. That's funny. Random question, not connected to that at all. Do you ever call Karina by like your cat's name or anything?
Oh yeah, they have similar names.
Oh, that is actually very true. Okay, yeah, that's fair. I call Raina by Abby is my wife's dog. I call them each other's names all the time, and I think it's just because they're little and cute and low to the ground.
Yeah. Little cute, low to the ground. Yeah, it's very easy. We're like, you're all just a blur down there.
Yeah, I'm sure that it sounds really bad to non-parents to do that, but I feel like it's understandable. Anyway, Dan M says in a super chat, you don't mistake Kamala for Vice President Trump unless you either have severe mental decline or you're deliberately helping Trump get reelected. It feels like everything is going Trump's way. I agree in part. You get names mixed up, it happens. Obviously with him, it is happening too often to simply be mistakes. I mean, it is a mistake, but I'm saying like, we'll mix up a name, it happens. It happens routinely with him. So I do agree about that.
It's without correcting himself was the big thing, right? The difference between the Zelensky mess up or the Putin mess up is that he corrected himself, but not recognizing that he said misspoke, I think is a problem.
Yeah. Okay, Rainbow Bright says in the members' comments, okay, he did all right compared to Trump, but can he do back-to-back rallies or are they gonna hide him? This doesn't ease or change my mind one bit because polls and numbers don't lie. Supposedly he's going to do a rally in Michigan. We will see what that's like. That generally is a better venue for him. He seems to feed off the crowd, and he likes having this teleprompter. So I'm less worried about that than I am about and the ground.
And he feeds off the crowd and the ground. Yeah.
100%. See, I made a mistake. It happens anyway. R Shells says in a member's comment, OMG, no, keep your hair like this, John. It's never looked more natural, or at least it enhances your potential tired dad phase. Well, I definitely have a tired dad phase, that's true. Sasha Rice says, John with this hair is channeling his inner Kyle Kalinske. That is funny.
That's true.
Yeah, look, I will say, I would never have done this intentionally. I dyed my hair purple after bleaching it, it faded away. But sometimes there's happy accidents.
Little Johnny yada yada gone blonde.
Every time I've intentionally done something
blonde,
that's bad.
it's different. You ever notice that John's different after becoming blonde?
Imagine if Trump randomly to social post roasted my hair. That'd be brutal.
I'm waiting for it.
Anyway, okay. Jesus Take the Wheel says, have you thought about doing a podcast together called The Bituation Report? Well, we kind of did that earlier today.
Everyone check it out. It was a great time.
It was
wherever
fun.
you get your podcast.
Jesus Take the Wheel also said, what's that?
I said wherever you get your podcast.
Exactly. Jesus Take the Wheel says, filed in brain under cute thing I love and feed. I think that's probably what happened. Okay, we'll be right back.
I put on the blinders, I say, I just do it. I just do it. I just do it.
Okay, everybody, let's forget about the presidential race as much as possible for as long as possible. We're gonna move on to other news as we close out this hour, starting with this video.
You said earlier this week that you support some restrictions on abortions after 15 weeks. Do you think that that contradicts what the party's new platform and new position is on this issue overall?
Look, we're not here to talk about abortion. My position is crystal clear, has not changed on abortion.
Okay, so add Republican Senate candidate Bernie Moreno to the long list of Republicans that really doesn't want to talk about abortion because they know how wildly unpopular their position is. So we're not super surprised that they don't want to talk about it. But in this case, you can be a little bit surprised considering what he had said just before being asked that question. Listen to this.
I can tell you this, if I'm here, I will talk to you at any point in time, even take tough questions. Sherrod Brown won't do that. If you can't come out here and address the media and talk to reporters and give your position and be unequivocal and clear, you have no business being in elected office. And I think that's what generationally we got to get rid of, is these guys that hide behind staff, hide behind their offices, zoom from one meeting to another so that they're not accountable. Those days have got to be over. You need people that are clear and transparent, tell people where they stand. And sometimes, by the way, it means that you're going to be controversial and you're going to say something that maybe not everybody agrees on, but that's what you owe your voters.
You said earlier this week that you support some restrictions on abortions after 15 weeks. Do you think that that contradicts what the party's new platform and new position is on this issue overall?
Look, we're not here to talk about abortion.
Oh, thank you to the editor for leaving that in. We were not exaggerating. It was right before that. So I'm here. I'll talk to you. I'll answer the tough questions. And I'm not worried about being controversial. You know, I'm going to give you my opinion. Not about that. Okay, so another big, bold alpha male Republican who realizes how behind the times he is, how unpopular his opinions are, and doesn't want to answer questions about it. Well, people need to keep asking the questions because right now we're in the middle of a period where the Supreme Court has turned hard against bodily autonomy for years, and they're going to do more. And at the same time, the Republicans are running a scam that the media, I think, played right into this week on the softening of the Republicans on abortion. Oh, they softened. They're pussycats when it comes to that stuff now. And you know what? It's Donald Trump that made them soften. He's not gonna come for your rights or anything. It's all BS. They know it's BS, but they're still doing PR for these Republicans. And we're gonna talk more about it, but what do you make of all that?
Oh, I love this. Just this clip is so perfect. It's so perfect. He goes on the bluster and no, I'm gonna be here. I'm not gonna tell you to F up. This is the work of a politician and blah, blah, blah. And then I'm not here to talk about that. Oh, I thought you were here to talk about hard questions. You just said you were, well, that's them. That's Democrats when they have hard questions. You don't, can we do, remember how we talked about we didn't want to talk about this? Just so silly to me. This is again, like, speaking of embarrassing, these are the two parties, right? The two parties, and one of them's like constantly throwing stones, constantly every accusation is a confession, and they can't talk about the biggest issue for a lot of voting Americans in November is where Republicans are at on abortion rights. And you're absolutely right, John, that this is the soft pedaling is utter BS. And the soft pedaling, let's be real, is like, I think it should still be up to the states. And also I think there should be carve outs for incest or rape, so long as you can prove it in a court of law over the course of, a year to 2 years, and oops, you're a mom now. Like, the exceptions for rape and incest are utter BS, as well as even if you left it to the states, which is being done right now thanks to the extremist Supreme Court, people are dying, they're bleeding out, they're unable to have children in the future, and not to say nothing of carrying pregnancies to terms when they're 7th graders. That's what's currently happening. So you're totally right. This entire the media is so easily diluted into, oh God, they're so invested into making Republicans a little bit less ghoulish than they truly are. And it's like, no. They want the whole kit and caboodle. They want to control women's bodies completely. Stop trying to soft pedal it and do their PR for them.
Yeah, and by the way, I don't even understand. It's so obvious that they're trying to fight back against how they've lost all these ballot measures and they lost in the midterms. And so it should be obvious to the media that's why they're doing it. But even if the strategy wasn't obvious, how can you report that they're softening when it says in the platform, we believe that the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States guarantees that no person can be denied life or liberty without due process, and that the states are therefore free to pass laws protecting those rights. So even when they claim they're not gonna do a federal mandate, which isn't true, they've already tried to do the federal mandate multiple times. They're saying there, we don't believe we need a law. The Constitution already bans these things. And you point out one good reason why the exceptions are BS. The exceptions are BS because they don't count for anything in practice, but they're also BS ideologically. You should not need to think long and hard about whether those few exceptions are gonna go away someday. They obviously will, not only because how hungry and horny the right is for stripping away rights, but also because they make no ideological sense. If you believe that abortion is murder, those exceptions don't make any sense to maintain.
Sure.
They are PR, that's all they are right now. They're branding, it's a spoonful of sugar to make the medicine go down. We think that obviously we haven't been able to convince the majority of the public that abortion is bad and we should outlaw it, but maybe if we do the exceptions, then we can slide it by and then eventually we get rid of the exceptions. That is 100% obviously the strategy. And it's, by the way, what he is doing. He doesn't want to answer questions because he knows what he'll vote for. He says, Bernie Moreno, that he supports a 15-week federal ban on abortions. And he says to eliminate elective late-term abortions. So not only is he the radical he wants you to avoid you knowing that he is, he said that, by the way, to win a primary, and now he needs to appear more moderate.
Right.
So 15 weeks to eliminate late-term abortions. So 16 weeks is now late term. 20 used to be the radical number the Republicans were pushing for. And also they're elective because those women, they're waiting until a week before they give birth. And they're like, you know what, honestly, I don't feel like it. A person that can believe something like that about women should not hold any elected office anywhere in America, regardless of what they vote for. Simply believing that's what people are like should be disqualifying. Any other thoughts?
Yes, I mean, thank you, New York Times editorial board, for saying this is disqualifying. Donald Trump saying sometimes babies are being aborted after birth. What are we talking about here? What planet are we on? And finally, for all the buttoned up Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire types who are like, well, in the Constitution, it doesn't actually there's no right to an abortion. No, there's not a right to an abortion in the Constitution. You know what there's a right to? Privacy. The very 14th Amendment they're trying to wield against abortion rights is the reason that Roe v. Wade was passed in the first place. The right to privacy, the right to say, I get to decide whether or not I become a parent, and no government should tell me what to do with my body. Thanks so much, bye.
Mm-hmm.
No one remembers that. We don't talk about that in Roe v. Wade. It was about privacy.
Yeah, by the way, you know what else isn't in the Constitution? The line, you know what, actually disregard this, just go with the Bible. I've looked, it does not appear anywhere in the Constitution, oddly enough. And they had ink and quills, they could have written it in if that's what they wanted to do. Anyway, with that said, we have enough time, I think, for one more story. So why don't we run to this last topic? I think it's something that Francesca would find interesting, and I aim to please. Let's jump to this. Okay, there's a little bit of tension right now amongst the Teamsters because their president, Sean O'Brien, is apparently going to be speaking at the RNC next week. And some in the union are not a big fan of that. Bearing in mind, of course, that these speaking opportunities are limited, so limited that up until the last 24 hours, Ron DeSantis wasn't even offered an opportunity to speak, but Sean O'Brien was. So he says, get off his back. He wants to speak at the RNC and the DNC, but so far has only been confirmed for the RNC. So it remains to be seen what he'll say there and whether he gets the opportunity to go to the DNC. But bear in mind that the Teamsters have given $45,000 to the Republican and Democratic national committees. O'Brien also met with Trump at Mar-a-Lago back in January. And later that month, he brought Trump into a meeting with the union's executive board. So if you want to pitch this as like sort of a cozy relationship, there are at least a few data points that you can do that with. That said, it's possible he's just terrified of what Donald Trump would do to unions once he got into office. There's good reason to be worried. So anyway, some union members are not happy about this. So we want to turn to the national chairman of the Teamsters National Black Caucus, James Kirby, who said, we will not allow the working class labor movement to be destroyed by a scab masquerading as a pro-union advocate after doing everything in his power to destroy the very fabric of unions. That's harsh. It's fighting words right there. But anyway, O'Brien's decision was also branded unconscionable by John Palmer, vice president at large of the Teamsters, who accused him of lending support to the most anti-union party and president in a generation. He says a speaking engagement at the Republican National Convention by Sean O'Brien, regardless of the message, only normalizes and makes the most anti-union party and president I've seen in my lifetime seem palatable. Do you think that's fair? What do you make of this speech?
I have been trying to find a way around this story that makes Sean O'Brien look justified in speaking at the RNC, and I just can't. Like, there has been no overture by Donald Trump publicly around unions and the right to unionize, clamping down on corporations that actually go after their own workers for unionizing. No, that's Joe Biden's presidency. That's been his legacy. That's his National Labor Relations Board that has done that. That is him. It's Joe Biden is Donald Trump is putting on like a fake, like a little coal miner's hat, and he's like, it's ruining my hair. Duck face, duck face. Like, Donald Trump like went to a non-union plant during the UAW strike to speak, and he could have totally gone to a unionized plant and decided not to. So it's just like Sean O'Brien, I don't know, it's sad because I think the Teamsters under his leadership has been somewhat successful at avoiding a strike last summer, at wielding their power. It seems like Sean's kind of like, again, kind of a working class tough guy. He and Mark Wayne, Mullen or whatever, from a senator from Oklahoma, almost came into blows, and it was very funny because Bernie Sanders had to get involved. Like, I thought maybe he had a thing going, but John, there's just no way. This is a party that is bankrolled by billionaires who are hell-bent on destroying unions, undermining any labor laws. They want to obliterate OSHA if they are reelected, right? Occupational Safety and Hazard Administration, like this protects all workers. And then you have the Chevron doctrine that they just overturned that would open the floodgates for corporations to sue unions because out of lost profits, because they had to, allow for the union to have a break, during the day, or air conditioning, these kinds of things. It's just like, nah, man, this is the wrong move.
Yeah, look, we're gonna get to the responses. That's what we'll close with. But Donald Trump does not care one bit about any worker, literally whether they live or die on the job. Like, this is not exaggerating to say. The Republicans are the party that is preemptively banning heat protections for workers in some of the hottest areas of the country. They literally don't care if you live or die. Do I need to remind you of the pandemic? That they wanted to shove you all back in the tight quarters so that you can get a respiratory infection and die on the job? They don't care about you. And I'm speaking specifically to Sean O'Brien here. But anyway, so he got into it with one of the Teamsters members and a podcaster, but I want to turn to 6 through 8. So here's how the right wing is greeting the Teamsters. So outside the arena where the convention will unfold, the Center for Union Facts, based on name alone, what sort of organization do you think that is? It's an anti-union group, has posted billboards calling the Teamsters two-faced and warning that the union has spent 99% of its advocacy on left causes. And here's what a spokesperson said coming out of all this drama. So there's Kara Dennis, who says, the Teamsters have never been afraid of democracy, but self-interested ideologues on the left and the right, within and outside the union, are terrified of democracy. I mean, Trump tried to overturn the results of the election. I think he may be the one who's against democracy, but they go on to say, General President O'Brien looks forward to addressing a crowd that hasn't traditionally been open to union voices, but that is what democracy is all about. Okay, that is one way to pitch the Republican Party and what their media has done to destroy faith in and support of unions. The fact that they talk routinely about literally shutting down the Department of Labor.
I mean, there's
traditionally been open to it.
There could be an argument that when we do General Strike 2028, led by UAW President Shawn Fain, who will then be running for president of the United States of America.
Hey, wake up, no dreams. We're doing a show.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, we're doing, no, I think, look, you could make a case. It's important for Republicans to actually hear from union leaders and unions about like the importance of them, what they do for you, I'm sure there are RNC members who are livid that he is addressing them, right? So maybe he will win over some folks. He probably, look, if he appears on stage with Donald Trump and is shaking his hand, absolutely not. But yeah, TBD.
Yeah, I doubt it will look like that. Look, to me, I generally don't think it's a good idea. That said, the most important thing is what he actually says.
Sure.
That's what I'm gonna judge 90% of it from. I don't have super high hopes, but I would love to be surprised. We'll see. Anyway, that is unfortunately all the time we have for the first hour of the show. Francesca, as always, thank you so much. It's a pleasure doing the news with you. I'll have you on the Damage Report live from the RNC next Monday. Everyone check out the Bituation room, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And everybody stick around, because coming up on the other side of this break, Yasmin Aliakana is gonna be taking the reins. Jordan Ewell and Mark Thompson are gonna be joining her for more news. You're not gonna wanna miss it. See you after that.
I am scary. I am threatening.
I'm Darth Vader.
Welcome to the Damage Report. I'm John Idarola. This is gonna be a big one. Meanwhile, in the Arctic, you know where this is going. You watch the Damage Report, the Arctic's on fire. Obviously, why would we be talking about the Arctic except to tell you that it's melting once again? The Republicans aren't that interested in it. I wonder why. Lift out of poverty up to 3.7 million people, including an estimated 1.3 million children. Hashtag save the children? Not if it costs money. I mean, come on.
At TYT, our mission is to boldly pursue truth, challenge the establishment, and drive positive change. At a time when corporate capture of our media, our government, and our politics is nearly absolute, everyday working people need a champion to fight for them and to push back against the powerful interests that threaten our democracy itself. At TYT, we're proudly progressive and call out corruption and duplicity wherever we see it, from Republicans, Democrats, or anyone else. And unlike mainstream news media outlets, we're not beholden to corporate advertisers, to defense contractors, to Wall Street, or to big pharma. We only have to answer to our audience, and for nearly 2 decades, we've accomplished that by delivering honest, timely, and insightful perspectives on the day's news without fear or favor or concern for whose toes we might step on or which powerful elites we might offend. And while we're super serious about the news, we also manage to do it in a way that is fun and lighthearted. We can do this together and serve our audience, and yes, have fun doing it.
Indisputable is still the fastest growing news show in America compared to CNN, Fox News, and 30 other networks. We tell the truth on Indisputable because the truth is indisputable. We go places that other news media outlets refused to go? When there were human rights abuses happening at the Victorville prison, guards and members of the community contacted us.
You, through your investigative reporting, unearthed very troubling allegations about specific forms of abuse and discrimination in the federal prison system.
It really doesn't take much to be a trusted voice. All it takes is to be fearless, report on matters, be an advocate. I called it the bullpen intentionally because it's a place of preparation. We present individuals who may have an opposing view, so we debate. Sometimes we interview individuals because their stories deserve to be heard. A survivor of significant police misconduct and his attorney. We covered this story earlier and to remind you of the horror of one man being shot at damn near 100 times by the police. We take time on this show to showcase the temper tantrums of Karens in the wild. We do this not because we want to see people's emotional outbursts in public, but because these incidents are emblematic of a bigger societal issue taking place across the nation, and it has to be checked.
My friend, my big homie, attorney at law, Benjamin Crump.
I just want to thank you, man. Educated, articulate brothers like yourself speak truth to power. It makes a great difference in changing the landscape in America. So
listen, no matter what you do, don't allow the politics of ideology to evaporate the soul that still exists inside of you. They don't stop, I don't stop. Racism won't stop, I won't stop. Systemic bias won't stop, I won't stop. People still need health care, so I won't stop. People still need criminal justice systems reform, so I won't stop. You won't stop either.
Welcome to our trash revolution.
I'm Batman.
Okay.
I put on the blinders, I say, I just do it. I just do it. I just do it.
Drop it. Hello, and we're here with the second hour of the Young Turks Power Panel. I'm Yasmin Khan, and joining me is Jordan Ewell. He's a Rebel HQ contributor and host of the Insurgents podcast. And I've also got Mark Thompson here, host of the Mark Thompson Show on YouTube. How are you guys doing tonight? You guys ready?
All right, good. A lot going on.
There's a lot going on. Yeah. And a lot has happened just today alone. So you know what? Let's just get right into it. Let's go to the tape.
In theory, it's a winnable race for Biden. But the question is, can he do the things he needs to do to win? And when you look at even recent historical context, nobody with this low of a job approval rating as an incumbent president has ever won. If they're going to make a move against Biden, though, they got to do it this weekend. They can't keep dragging this out. They can't keep waiting for another moment, another excuse.
So according to Chuck Todd, Democrats are running out of time to try and get Joe Biden out of the presidential race. Thankfully for Biden, his press conference last night was not the complete meltdown that many suspected it could have been. But according to Axios, a dedicated group of Democrats are still working feverishly behind the scenes to get Biden off of the ticket. Axios unofficially dubbed them the Committee to Unelect the President, which is kind of a cool name. The group is described as comprising of very connected Democrats, mostly veterans of the Obama and Clinton administrations. These Democrats see the race in stark black and white terms. Just 3 states matter: Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And they see an obvious solution. Forget the niceties of backing Biden or even Vice President Harris. Be ruthless about finding the two people most likely to win those 3 states. Many are in conversation with lawmakers to push their leaders to squeeze Biden and his inner circle. They know Biden and his family seem unmovable, so they hope for the use of overwhelming force by the Obamas and Clintons and Schumer and Jeffries and Pelosi. That same Axios report stated that some donors are promising to give big to any candidate who just is not Joe Biden. Others are withholding their money altogether until a change is made. Today, the New York Times reported that some major Democratic donors have told the largest pro-Biden super PAC, Future Forward, that roughly $90 million in pledged donations is now on hold if President Biden remains atop the ticket, according to 2 people who have been briefed on the conversations. So there's quite a bit there. Jordan, let's start with you. First, do you think any of this will actually work to get Biden off of the 2024 ticket? And second, what does this say about money in politics in regards to donors withholding money to Biden?
Yeah, it is a sad state of affairs when we're looking to big donors in the hopes that they could dictate the outcome of the nominee or dictate a better chance of beating Donald Trump. To be clear, there are very real threats that Donald Trump poses, and I think we're all in agreement. Even the people who want to support Biden are in agreement that we need to defeat him soundly. We can't leave anything on the table. So it is a cruel irony that big donors with potentially withholding tens of millions of dollars or more could be one of our only hopes. The stories that we're seeing about Biden and his team right now are disheartening. I just to be completely objective here, when you have a very tight-knit, close circle of advisors taking shots at other White House staff, when you have them throwing the Pod Save America hosts under the bus and accusing them of ghostwriting op-eds for George Clooney, when you have them speaking out in the media, insisting that everything is okay, it is a really sad state of affairs, and it shows they're operating from a place of worry, of concern, and they're totally disoriented. And the argument I think that's the strongest for replacing Biden is that Kamala Harris, who I think the most likely replacement would be, is a much stronger messenger because she does not seem to have the same cognitive impairments. And you have big news that the administration is doing. We're going to get into more of it later today, but a story we're not going to cover is the DOJ is looking at corporate landlord collusion, and who better to make that case than someone like a Kamala Harris. Instead, Biden's on the trail defending himself. Last night at the press conference, all he did was defend himself and insist he should stay in that race where any other candidate wouldn't be plagued by that same bad story.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's always better to be on the offense and not the defense, because at this point he's already in the losing position. He's not on top of the hill, let's say. Mark, what do you have to say?
First I want to props to you, Jordan, for mentioning the collusive landlord thing, because the trail of breadcrumbs on that extends back to the Supreme Court and Harlan Crow and a bought and paid for Supreme Court in Clarence Thomas and beyond. But again, you're right. The noise that you can make about that is engulfed by the other noise that's being made about the condition of the top of ticket candidate. Look, it's not unusual to have big money exert leverage. You see it at universities now recently, as you're aware, with the Gaza conflicts, et cetera. You also, in American politics, it's one of the saddest things, and it's one of the things that I think makes TYT so special, because they keep beating the drum and trying to make a difference to get money out of politics. We're backsliding the wrong way, but yeah, these donors expect something for their money. You hear Cenk talk about it and Anna talk about it all the time. They want something for the money, and in this case, they want Biden off that ticket. The other thing I would say is that Chuck Todd in a perfect world can say they need to do it this weekend. I think, to Jordan's point, they are cloistered, they are cocooned in that White House. It's Biden, it's his son, it's his wife Jill Biden. It seems as though they're impenetrable right now. And since he didn't, this is my last point, he didn't boot that presser He didn't have a bad one. I got it. He made some gaffes, but he was pretty impressive in terms of his ability to marshal detailed information. I think this weekend it's going to be pretty hard to press that case. So.
Well, to that point, Biden did attempt to do some damage control today by speaking to the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. He may have done a little bit more harm than good. An anonymous source said that Biden started the meeting on the wrong foot by showing up an hour late. Nobody likes a tardy president. But then Biden's campaign reportedly blocked 2 lawmakers in the caucus from asking questions. But Representative Mark Levin did manage to get through to the president, and then Levin called on Biden to step down as a nominee. Here's how Biden responded according to a transcript of the call obtained by Notice. He said, and it's kind of a weird one, that was great when you were feeling good. Biden, are you okay now? That's what's underlying. That's what people are worried about. I've got a grandfather who's 85 years old and he can't walk. It's a legitimate concern for people, but that's why I think it's important. I got to get out and show people everything from how well I move to how much I know, and that I'm still in good charge. We got to see how well he moves. Biden then stated he could take one more question, but the host of the call ended it early. Shortly after, Levin became the 19th congressional Democrat to publicly call for Biden to leave the race. Well, none of that really inspires a lot of confidence, but what do you think, Mark? I know you were talking about it a little bit earlier.
Well, we went to the Mariah Carey show. She was 2 hours late, so it was still a great show. So again, it's not a deal buster to be an hour late. To be fair to Biden, I don't know how much he had to do with being an hour late and how much his staff did, but to the point, you don't win over people by being that late. I do think what you're seeing in that, and this is why this is instructive, is you're seeing those leaks and essentially those who've already made up their mind on Biden now beginning to speak up in these Zoom calls. I mean, it's intimidating to be in a Zoom call with the president of the United States and for there to be sort of this comfort level with broaching the subject of, do you really think you still have it, sir? I think that's a sign that, again, we're reaching a tipping point on this. The question is how quickly we reach it. But I think what we've just seen is evidenced by this call is some, cracks in the armor.
Yeah, absolutely. And they are trying to frame this as just one bad night. And then like Mark said, the press conference last night wasn't terrible, which let's admit that is a low bar for the president of the United States. This is a sad state of affairs. But the thing is, for instance, even at the beginning of that press conference last night, confusing Harris with Trump, saying Vice President Trump. Earlier in the day, confusing Zelensky and Putin, the gaffes at the debate. And admittedly, I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility, more potentially major gaffes that will occur between now and the election. All of those moments are going to compile and continue to feed that sentiment of doubt in Joe Biden's ability. And while they're trying to frame it as a bad night, a lot of people can recognize rightfully, especially people who have had loved ones in their family experience cognitive decline in their later years. It's progressive and it gets worse over time, and it's not something that you can reverse the clock on. They will think about what a President Biden, a theoretical President Biden would look like in 2026, 2027, and they're thinking long term. So while there is a good amount of Americans who will just vote for whoever that isn't Donald Trump, I don't necessarily think that's enough. And Democrats, in my opinion, would be smart to consider the alternative, somebody who's younger, somebody who can restore that faith in voters who have a sense of doubt and can also articulate a message around the administration's wins, guarantee they'll do more, and also sell a set of policy objectives that they want to accomplish in a second term. To date, I haven't seen Biden be able to do much of that. It's been a lot of defense. And then, of course, last night, a lot of talk about NATO. But he needs to sell an agenda. And I don't know if he's capable of doing that.
Yeah, real quick, I just want to clarify that representative, his name was Mike Levin. I think I said Mark Levin. But also, I do tend to agree with what both of you were saying as far as, first, let me start off by saying that I'm of the opinion that Biden's going to be on the ticket in 2024. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. That's not necessarily a prediction. I just don't really see it happening realistically. So at this point, I think what needs to happen is Do you guys remember when George W. Bush was in the White House, whenever he was, even on the ticket when he was the president-elect even, and everybody was so nervous that he wasn't competent enough to be the president. And the narrative around that was, it's fine because the president is just a figurehead and he has people in his cabinet who are actually going to be doing the work. I think that might be a reasonable approach for the Democrats to take as far as Biden being the president. If we're not confident with his personal specific cognitive abilities, he's got a good team around him. We're running for the Democratic platform and for the Democratic Party. We're not necessarily running Joe Biden as a president. So anyway.
I think, by the way, I think that's defensible in a weird way because there is some truth to the fact that the president can be the architect or maybe the leader of a team, but then he can go, well, we saw what happened with Donald Trump. You have an extreme example. I mean, this guy's vacuous. He couldn't even name a handful of countries in NATO, and yet he wants to pull out of NATO. And he's essentially a guy who's there for the photo op, and then he goes on to the golf course. Doesn't start his day till 11. He's in a bathrobe watching Fox and Friends most of the time. So you saw 4 years of administration being handled by other people. Similarly, there's a lot in the administration of this Joe Biden presidency that's being handled by others. So there's something to that, but let me just quickly note that Jordan's right. There's part of the presidency that's about messaging. It's about communicating your philosophy or communicating your values, whatever it might be. And Biden has lost a few steps in that regard, and that hurts when it comes to campaigning. But I think both can be true. He can lose those steps and still have a decent administrative staff. But I don't know if it's enough to drag him over the finish line.
The only thing I think the administration point is totally right. Like we said earlier, we're covering some of the stories about the administration later tonight. And that landlord story is another instance of what an administration under a Democrat looks like. And I think across the board, you look at the FTC, you look at the Department of Labor, much, much better under a Democrat, whoever it is, even if it is somebody like a Joe Biden who's not all there. The only thing I would say to push back on somebody who may not be as competent, I mean, the Bush example, that created a pathway for Dick Cheney to completely exploit that and got us into a quagmire in the Middle East, relying on the unitary executive theory that now Donald Trump through Project 2025 could certainly exploit and totally reshape our government. So certainly, you got to look at the whole administration when you're casting your vote, but also that does present a vulnerability when it is someone like a Bush or potentially a Biden.
That is an excellent point. You always have to look out for the Dick Cheneys in the administration whenever the president is maybe not as strong as we would like him to be. But with that, we got to take our first break. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the member break. How excited are you for the RNC? Who's pumped? Let's see. I want to see comments from people who's very excited for the RNC. How many of you are attending? But more importantly, how many of you are tuning in on Monday night at 8:30 Eastern for TYT's coverage of the RNC? Jank, Anna, John, Michael Schur, all the heavy hitters are going to be there. You aren't going to want to miss it. I'm tuning in. It's going to be a blast. It's going to bring some sanity to that madness. It should be fun, if not terrible for the country. But don't miss it, 8:30 starting on Monday night. Mark, you like that?
I thought that was great. Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to watch. It's going to be good. It's going to be insane, and it should be fun.
I'm still scared for John to just be there. I'm getting anxiety because John is going. I'm not even going to be there. I'm not even going to watch, but I'm nervous for John.
I am too. But because of how he looks right now, in the aftermath of the purple hair thing, he's got that white hair and thick glasses. He just
no one's
looks
gonna
like
mess
a
with him.
Yeah.
He
looks like a
is off-putting.
stereotypical. He just looks like a quintessential stereotypical liberal, and I feel like that might be a target for him. So John, maybe shave your head or dye it jet black.
Oh no, I think he looks like he could be one of those bros, those right-wing bros. You can play it either way, but anyway,
give him a MAGA hat. That's all he needs.
Exactly. All's forgiven.
True. Yeah, that's an easy fix.
All right, let's get into some of these member comments. Deanne Loso says, hi, everyone. Just relaxing for the evening with a Mike's Hard Lemonade after having a stressful day of running around, trying to get things done after the fire. It's a hurry up and wait situation. Thank you to all of you who have given your support to me, my husband, and our fur baby. I think I'm missing a little bit of context there, but I'm glad your day is getting a little bit better, Deanne. Uriah Heap says, give Yasmin all the love as she lives in Houston with all the electrical problems and 100+ heat. It's early in the hurricane season and the city will get hit again. Yeah, we're just talking about that. Glad you're doing well, Yasmin. Any other fallout there?
Yeah. It is kind of scary because this is the first hurricane of the season for us here in Houston. It really wasn't that bad as far as hurricanes go, but I've said it on the show before. A lot of times whenever you have these natural disasters, the mismanagement both before and after the storm can make things so much worse for so many more people. My friends on the west side just got their power back today. I was lucky. We never lost power at my house, but a lot of people were not so lucky. Welcome back to the Young Turks. I'm here with my co-hosts. I have Mark and I have Jordan, and we're all happy to be here. So let's get into this next story. It's actually some good news. That's fun. The IRS has collected $1 billion from delinquent wealthy taxpayers, which is great. The effort was made possible by Congress and the White House infusing the IRS with more resources. The Biden administration initially signed a law giving $80 billion to the agency, but $20 billion of that was cut thanks to negotiations with Republicans. According to reporting from the New York Times, the IRS targeted 1,600 taxpayers with more than $1 million of income who owed more than $250,000 in tax debt. Daniel Werfel, the IRS commissioner, said that because of the agency's larger enforcement staff, it has been able to focus on tracking down and sending letters to taxpayers who owe money. The letters included threats of additional penalties until the taxpayers eventually paid their tax bills, the IRS said. Werfel said that he believed many rich taxpayers had neglected to pay their bills just because they thought the IRS didn't have the capacity to go after them. They just thought they could get away with it. To the delinquent taxpayers, he had this to say: our message for these taxpayers is that now that we are resourced, we can do the job of ensuring that they pay. In other words, watch out, rich people, because the IRS is coming for you. And just to clarify, these aren't taxes that were in dispute or anything like that. They were simply unpaid. They just didn't pay them. And you might be thinking $60 billion into the IRS just to recover $1 billion. That sounds like a lot of money for not a whole lot of payout, but that $60 billion is to be spread out over the years. The IRS so far has only used about 10% of that money, and they're just getting started. It's expected that recovery will become quicker and more streamlined as the process continues. So Jordan, I have a question. As a not millionaire, I assume, please correct me if I'm wrong, but did you know all along that it was an option to just not pay your taxes?
No, not something I ever wanted to test. Knowing hearing about how stiff the penalties can be, it's just that's not an agency of the government I want to be on the wrong side of. But also, as much as it is a pain, we're doing this theoretically to create a better system, a better environment, a better culture, a better society, and people want to exploit that for their own personal gain. It's a very selfish way to see the system. This idea that taxation is theft ignores all of the benefits that these same people benefit from, all the research that our tax dollars funds to make America's medical system a decent one. I wouldn't say great one. The innovations that we've created with our tax dollars have changed the world. So that's ridiculous. But you will see Republicans and conservatives complain about this. They want to dismantle the IRS. And in Project 2025, they want to completely change the tax system to a 15% flat tax for working people who make $168,000 and under, and 30% or more. But within that, there are other changes that benefit the wealthy, including reducing the capital gains tax. When 82% of income for the top 1% and 88% of income for the top 0.001% comes from capital gains. So the ultra wealthy under Project 2025 in a conservative administration would get the same tax rate on how they make most of their money as the working poor in this country. So ignore any right-wing attacks about increased audit rates and getting back taxes, because it's important and it's critical, and the alternative is just benefiting the wealthy and shifting the tax burden onto the working people.
What the right did when they were in power under Trump is they essentially sapped the IRS of all that money that you were mentioning, yes, the money that's now sort of reinvigorated the enforcement arm of the IRS. And that was designed to let the richiest riches go untaxed. I mean, in other words, the SEAL Team 6 of the IRS that would be designated to go after the wealthiest and to track down those tax scofflaws, there wasn't the funding for that. So what ends up happening is that those of us who don't make as much, we kind of fall into some sort of enforcement net. And I think, as is pointed out, a lot of us don't like all the ways that our money is spent. I mean, defense and decisions that are made with a lot of money can oftentimes make us less than comfortable. On the other hand, there's a lot great that's spent with our money, and I think Jordan articulated that well. And I would just say that the plan, as noted, for the future under a Trump administration, essentially renders the wealthiest people, who, by the way, are already lawyered up with some of the finest tax loopholes they can find, it allows them to really run loose without any sort of real tax bill. And what happens is we end up paying, that is to say, lower income Americans end up paying those taxes. And the final thing, to do a jank on you, the final thing is that the right is always talking about the deficit. What about the deficit, the deficit, the deficit? When you cut taxes, you are increasing the deficit. So the idea somehow that every time you want a social program, well, how are we going to pay for it? How are we going to pay for it? But Trump just talks about cutting taxes and no one asks him, how are you going to pay for it?
Yeah, Trump gets away with a lot of that because he'll just say things and nobody ever asks him for follow-up. And ever since he started running in 2015, that has always just baffled me. I never got it. And to Jordan's point, there is a lot of American individualism here, right? That's kind of what our country has been based on, or at least over the past few decades. If you can game the system, you really should, right? That's why so many people who supported people like Donald Trump and all of his other lackeys, right? Giuliani and Roger Stone, those kind of people, all those people who don't pay their taxes, who don't pay their workers, who don't pay their lawyer fees or anything like that, they just earn more respect from their supporters because, hey, they're getting away with it. They figured out a way to do it. They're smarter than everybody else. They're just not good people either. And they're taking money out of your pockets and they're making things worse for everybody in the country, really. And, to Mark's point, nobody likes paying taxes. Nobody's ever going to like paying taxes. There's always going to be things that you're paying that you don't love supporting. And I know that that's particularly relevant for a lot of people these days. And there's a lot of things that you would like to see your money going towards that it's just not going towards, the benefits that you would like to reap that you're not reaping. And, over administrations, the idea is that, you get to choose, I like this administration because they're going to put more of my money to these things and less of it to those things. So hopefully going forward, it'll become a little bit more equitable going forward instead of just like, these rich people who are already, they have more control than the rest of us, let's just say, right? They're disproportionately represented in our government. And our last story kind of spoke to that, how these people, these big donors, they have a lot more control over government and the things that get passed than we do. So hopefully things can balance a little bit from that point. So any final thoughts from either of you? No, all good?
I think you summed it up well.
That's it. All right. Well, let's move on.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, I thought you summed it up.
Story then. No problem. Next story. All right. It seems that President Biden has given up on what was supposed to be a humanitarian venture in Gaza. It's a little less of a fun story than the last one. The so-called humanitarian pier that was meant to help transport aid to civilians in Gaza has had to contend with rough seas and weather-related setbacks since it was first announced 4 months ago. Now the Pentagon says that after its most recent failure to reconnect the floating pier to the Gaza shoreline, it will cease operations of the pier entirely. The pier cost the US $230 million, and since mid-May, it delivered 20 million pounds of food to the Palestinians. Now that might sound like a lot, but it's really, really not. According to very rough UN estimates, about 500 aid trucks entered Gaza prior to October 2023. Over the course of 2 months, the US pier delivered roughly 1 day's worth of pre-October aid. The pier was always meant to be a temporary measure while the US tried to convince Israel to allow aid trucks through, but as you can imagine, those efforts have been largely unsuccessful. And the pier has been controversial from the get-go. Republicans argued that the pier put US troops in danger. That hasn't really been demonstrated though. And President Biden has come off as disingenuous, to put it nicely, in terms of his humanitarianism. While the Biden administration was making attempts, weak attempts, but attempts nonetheless, to provide aid for the people who need it the most, it was also supplying Israel with more weaponry. The Biden administration recently announced that it will resume sending bombs to Israel after having previously paused shipments. But don't worry, they're only sending now the 500-pound bombs, not the 2,000-pound bombs, so it's better. In May, after Israel was using the US-supplied bombs in Rafah, Biden stopped sending them to Israel, citing concerns for the safety of Palestinians. However, once Israel announced that it would end its campaign in Rafah, shipments of the 500-pound bombs were allowed to resume. The 2,000-pound bombs are apparently where the US draws its line. According to a US official who spoke anonymously, he said, "Our main concern had been and remains the potential use of 2,000-pound bombs in Rafah and elsewhere in Gaza. Because our concern was not about the 500-pound bombs, those are moving forward as part of the usual process." Now, there's more, but I want to get your thoughts, Jordan, I guess, on war in general, but also talk a little bit about the duplicity between providing bombs to the bombers and aid to the people who are being bombed at the same time. I feel like that doesn't really get talked about enough. And how are we as Americans supposed to feel about any of this?
With all of this, the devil is in the details. So they're saying, oh, we're going to withhold the 2,000-pound bombs, but we'll give them the 500-pound bombs. Let's look at the consequences of both. A 500-pound bomb can severely harm or kill everything or anyone in a 20 meter radius. A 2,000-pound bomb has a destruction radius of 35 meters. So not the biggest difference, and they're acting like this is some huge sweeping change in how this war is waged. And it's even worse when they're dropping them on residential areas. Gaza City is now being repopulated, or not repopulated, let me be clear. The IDF is withdrawing from some parts of Gaza City, and people are returning to find that their neighborhoods have been completely destroyed. Their hospital is gone. Everything that they knew and loved and held dear in that area is gone. It is rubble because of these bombs that we're supplying to Israel. And on this pier thing, they tried to sell this as some success. Throughout its duration, it was only operational for maybe a little over 20 days. And they bragged about 8,500 tons of food making it through. And that is the equivalent of 425 aid trucks. That sounds like a lot, right? Well, Gaza needs about 600 trucks of aid every single day. So throughout that whole duration, all the millions spent, they weren't even able to meet the daily quota of aid necessary to help people in need. These same people, like you point out, are being bombed with arms supplied by the US. It is so unbelievably insidious, and the US is completely complicit.
It's such a tough situation because it's just sadness really everywhere you look on the Gaza situation. And with regard to the pier, it was never really working well, the pier. It had sustained damage. There'd been storms. It was not this sort of, great, we set up the pier, let's start unloading food. It just didn't work out quite that way from the get. And then the reality of what Gaza is now, what Gaza is going to be, and the political end game is really complicated and nuanced, and it's sad, frankly. That's the only word that comes to mind. I thought there were going to be close to some kind of resolution on this, meaning, I mean, it's wildly imperfect given everything that's happened, but that there'd be some cessation of immediate hostilities, maybe hostage release, I don't know, but now I'm not so sure. Those seem to be maybe a fading dream. I think the overall situation with Gaza military support, just to address the last point, is again, it's complicated. That's where you get into the politics of an administration that feels a connection to what they feel is the only democracy in the region, the same country that has, I was going to say, supports essentially the same values as America. Whatever it's an old world view, but it is definitely the dominant view. And then you face the very real prospect that the new administration under Donald Trump would be even harder right. I mean, there's a brutality about what's waiting in the shadows that's positively chilling. So the situation is across the board sad, and the connection that we feel, the U.S., I'm talking about diplomatically, to Israel is definitely being stressed.
Yeah, and speaking of sadness, here's some more sad information to follow up that. There's not a whole lot of word on what kind of continued aid efforts into Gaza will look like from this point. But here's a quick reminder of how dire the situation actually is over there. Last week, The Lancet published a study finding that the Gaza death toll could potentially exceed 186,000 people, or 8% of the pre-war population, taking into consideration not just deaths from bombing and ammunitions, but also deaths from rampant disease, starvation, dehydration, and lack of shelter. And speaking of starvation, according to UN experts, Israel's targeted starvation campaign in Gaza, that's a quote, is a form of genocide with famine rampant throughout the region. Israel has since accused the UN of spreading misinformation and supporting Hamas propaganda. Also, despite Israeli blockades reducing aid flow throughout Gaza, Israel also accused the UN of failing to do their job to distribute aid effectively and efficiently. So, more sad news, not a whole lot of hope on the horizon for the Palestinians. Jordan, any final thoughts?
I take issue with people, not us three, but just in general, I see it often in media, in punditry, and even in communications online. People who support Israel, and if they want to do that, that's their right, but they will see a headline like that. And to me, that just makes my heart sink, because you think about all of those lives lost, and they see that headline and they think, this is the opportunity for me to split hairs about what label they're using. It's not a genocide, or it's not an occupation. And to those people, I just ask, what are you doing to make sure the suffering ends? What are you doing to try to fight to make sure that this suffering ends? And more often than not, sadly, there's nothing. It's just they want to run cover for what Israel is doing, and that's just deeply unsettling. It seems like a very hollow way to approach a very real tragedy.
I think it's also you're dealing with a little bit of a battered wife syndrome, in the sense that there is a strong Jewish community in the West that feels a strong resurgence of anti-Semitism. I'm sure they would say that there's any excuse that is used to to produce an anti-Semitic response. And so you have violence against Jews. You have, this is something that the Jewish community has endured for decades. And I suspect that there is some of that informs a bit of perspective when it comes to looking at the Middle East. So I at least the dialogue, because you referenced the dialogue, Jordan, I think the dialogue's informed on some level because of those real anxieties. That's not, those are not concocted. Levels of Jew hating in this country and violence against Jewish people has gone up. So all I'm trying to explain, and I'm not excusing it, I'm simply suggesting that there's a bit of that underpins a lot of that perspective that you just mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. We shouldn't discount that it's a different connection than, say, U.S. observers or U.S. commentators on the war in Iraq or Afghanistan. It is a very unique situation, and there are like family ties, ethnic ties, religious ties. Absolutely. My issue is just with people who only want to get involved to push back on a label. But totally hear you. I'm totally in agreement. I think it's a totally fair point, Mark.
Yeah, and I think overall, whenever you're looking at international conflicts, like especially ones like this one, there's often two different sides to different ways of looking at it, I'll say, right? Not just the two sides that are fighting each other, but two different perspectives as far as there's always a political aspect of it, and then there's always a cultural or religious aspect of it. And sometimes the cultural religious aspects will be used to justify the more political aspects. So there's always that underlying impact on either side. So they both have to kind of like find harmony somewhere. And harmony is not a thing that really exists during war. But anyway, we got to take our next break. So we'll be right back.
Welcome to the social break. Who's excited for RNC coverage starting on Monday night at 8:30 Eastern? Jank, Anna, John, they're all going to be there. Michael Shore, can't forget about him. The clips that he is going to pull and the clips that he is going to get are going to be gold. I cannot wait for whatever Michael Shore comes back with. That's going to be incredible. But let's get to some member comments. This is your Bardo says, Yaz is experiencing cognitive decline. She had to correct a name. Can you confirm or deny?
I'll take the hit. All right, I'll take the hit. At least I corrected it, right? At least, things happen when you're talking so much, things just fly out of your mouth. And
I see. All of a sudden they're excuses, but for Joe Biden, it's time to get out of the race. All right, I see what's happening.
I have shameless excuses. That's what I have.
Well, we'll run some polling between now and the bonus episode, and we might have to replace you with Mark Thompson for the bonus episode.
Oh, wow.
Speaking of Mark Thompson, Shadua says, always happy to see Mark, the voice Thompson on. It is always good.
I love being here.
Mark,
thank you.
Voice.
Yeah, thank you. I love being here. It's one of my favorite places to show up. And so thank you. Yeah. By the way, let me just mention, since there's a second, the other favorite place to show up is my show, The Mark Thompson Show, which is 2 hours live every day on YouTube. Starts at 11 Pacific, 11 to 1. But you can watch it any old time. So please subscribe and do me a solid and be part of the community. But next to my show, this is my favorite place to be.
Electric Miscellaneous says, I can definitely say that this is the best power panel today. Please don't tell them that there wasn't a power panel for hour one. Okay. Secret safe with us.
Wow. That compliment went south in a hurry.
Yeah, I mean, I'll still take it.
Oh, okay.
We win.
Okay.
We win this Friday. Punch Up says John has watched hours of self-defense with steel chairs. Yeah, I think John's going to be throwing some elbows. He's fine. If he gets attacked, he's good. He's just going to put him in the stunner. He'll be okay. He's got so many wrestling moves in his arsenal.
The stunner. He's going to break out the stunner at the Republican convention. Wow. Something that now I really do want to watch.
Don't miss it, Mark.
Yeah.
Monday night, starting at 8:30 Eastern, TYT's RNC coverage. It's going to be a blast. I can't wait. Let's see here. Electric Miscellany again. Media, 72% of Americans think Biden isn't fit to be president. DNC yawn. Who cares? Media. Mega donors are freezing 90 million in donations. DNC. Red alert. We must get Biden to step down. It's sad but true. The donors have the power here. They don't care about us. But we will be back with much more. Stick around.
Welcome back to the Young Turks. I'm Yasmin and I'm here with my co-hosts Jordan and Mark. Let's get into this next story. Let's do it.
Most of the western U.S. is facing excessive heat warnings, but the dangerously high temperatures extend all the way to the East Coast. It was so hot in New York City Monday, the 3rd Avenue bridge to the Bronx expanded too much and got stuck open. And in Oregon, authorities are investigating 4 deaths they say could be related to the oppressive triple-digit temperatures.
Check in on your neighbors and your friends and your family members, people who may be at risk of having a heat-related illness.
Whew, I'm hot right now. As we head into the hottest summer months, things are hotter than ever in the United States. In fact, we're already breaking heat records, but people who typically work outside could get a bit of relief soon. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, under the Biden administration, has proposed a rule that would protect workers from the risk of heat-related injuries, illnesses, and death. This is, perhaps shockingly, the first time that something like this has been proposed on a national level. The rule could positively impact an estimated 35 million workers across the nation, everyone from delivery people to mail carriers, construction workers, agricultural workers, maintenance workers, and more, anyone who works outside. And these protections aren't exactly groundbreaking. At 80 degrees, employers would be required to provide water and breaks to workers as needed. At 90 degrees, 15-minute breaks every 2 hours would be required, and workers would have to be monitored for signs of heat illness. And by the way, that's 80 and 90 degrees in the shade. So really, these workers are already working under much hotter conditions before these protections would even kick in. But as you can probably imagine, not everyone is happy about any of this. Happy workers means what? Unhappy employers, right? Employers are fighting back, saying that these new regulations would, you guessed it, cost too much money and hinder productivity. Part of their antagonism towards all of this is that they say they're already doing enough to protect their workers. Well, just now we showed you a couple of maps that showed where it's hottest in the United States and where workers would most benefit from this rule. Texas is one of the hottest states in the nation with a significant outdoor workforce. Until last year, Texas had local rules across the state that mandated water breaks for outside workers. Those local rules were put in place because workers were actually dying from heat-related illnesses and dehydration. But then in June 2023, Texas Governor Greg Abbott eliminated those local mandates, arguing that employers would protect their workers without having to be told to do so. But they weren't doing it before. There's more on this, but let's get your thoughts first. Is it strange that employers need to be told to take care of their workers, or is this just capitalism being capitalism? Mark, let's start with you.
Well, this is the storied reality of workers and their relationship to employers since that relationship began. I mean, that's why unions are so powerful, because they can give you the power of collective bargaining and you can exert some leverage. Sadly, a lot of these jobs are occupied by non-union employees, and the states that were shown in that map, most of them are, as you suggest, sort of concentrated with home building and agriculture and these jobs that by necessity have people outside. But again, these are oftentimes non-union type situations. And so they are suffering by far the greatest number of heat-related deaths. It's a brutal commentary on the ability of employers to evade a lot of sort of basic care that one might extend to an employee. And so the government has to step in and make sure it happens. And I hate to get political again. I mean, to always default to what will happen if, but this was a very, very hard-fought battle to get any kind of recognition with this increasing heat and these excruciating conditions that workers are under, to have any relief for them. It will all be erased. It will all be scuttled under a Trump administration. No chance that it survives.
Yeah, absolutely. That can't be stressed enough, that is gone. I mean, Trump is basically asking for bribes from big oil. Donate to my campaign. All of those environmental regulations are gone. And think about what we're talking about here. We're talking about breaks, 15-minute breaks, and water being provided to people working outside during extreme heat days. That's not, I think, something that's untenable for a company to adhere to. And they're acting as if we're saying they're not even allowed to work if it goes above 90 degrees. They're opposing water breaks. That is ridiculous. And think about the context here. Globally, this is from over the past 13 months. Each month globally has been the hottest on record. The planet is getting warmer. These problems are intersectional. That's when you talk about climate as a multifaceted intersectional problem. Climate change is just that, because you see how it manifests in all of these different arenas. For instance, on July 7th, Las Vegas was 120 degrees. And corporations want to argue with a straight face that people working in those conditions don't deserve water breaks. 120 degrees, and they can't have 15 minutes off for shade. This is how out of control capitalism is without guardrails. That they think this is a serious argument, and people will die. People absolutely will die in those conditions. And in response to that, in the Washington Post article, they said, some people have questioned the entire initiative, saying that a workplace heat rule is unnecessary because not many workers die from heat exposure. Not many? Some do. What are you doing to stop those? And it's only going to get worse as the temperatures on the planet continue to rise.
Yeah, I remember reading that and I could not believe it. But you know what? Those employers might have an ally and none other than Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. He's got his sights set on taking down OSHA now. He's arguing that the agency that protects workers' rights in the workplace is actually not a good thing. It's unconstitutional. According to Thomas, OSHA is an outside agency that should not have legislative powers akin to congressional authority. He had this to say: Congress purported to empower an administrative agency to impose whatever workplace safety standards it deemed appropriate. That power extends to virtually every business in the United States. It would be no less objectionable if Congress gave the Internal Revenue Service authority to impose a tax on a particular person that it deems appropriate. And this comes just a year after a US Court of Appeals determined that OSHA was, in fact, constitutional. Now, I don't know what Clarence Thomas is up to, but he really seems to be looking out for big business here, which would fall right in line with everything else he does. These heat protections can't come soon enough for these workers. Mark, let's start with you. What do you think about Clarence Thomas's crusade against OSHA?
Well, Clarence Thomas is the leader of the parade, but you don't have to go past Clarence Thomas very far to find others who are in that parade. You look at Neil Gorsuch. I mean, this is all reminiscent of how Neil Gorsuch and this incredibly corporate-friendly US Supreme Court sides always with business. Gorsuch's ruling in that case that we've mentioned here before, the frozen trucker case, where somebody's literally, it's 14 below zero. The trucker is huddled in his cab. He's lost the feeling in his torso, in his extremities. He's got a burning sensation. He feels himself dying of exposure. He leaves his truck, and then is back in court to sue for his job and to get these because they got rid of him. And Gorsuch, Neil Gorsuch, the same guy who's on the US Supreme Court now, ruled for the business that the guy should never have left the truck behind. He had been there hours waiting for help and he was freezing to death. This is the kind of Supreme Court we have. So Thomas, as I say, he's tip of the spear, but behind him, you've got Gorsuch and Kavanaugh and Barrett. They are all, and Alito, incredibly business friendly. They have no regard for the worker.
Yeah, and think about what a Trump administration, to Mark's earlier point, it's important that we talk about all of these policy priorities or agency or bureaucracy issues within the context of what it would look like under a Trump administration. With Project 2025, replacing people at the Department of Labor, replacing people at OSHA with Trump loyalists, everything's gone. Every worker protection that Biden implemented, and they would chip away at much more if they can. It is going to be completely unsafe for workers. It's going to be dangerous. No regard for climate change, its effects on workers working outside in extreme heat days. And corporations will benefit. They want to wring workers out for every last penny they can, leave them discarded on the side of the road. To go back to Mark's story, they don't care because all they care about is maximizing profit. The only thing they're worried about is their bottom line.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting too how the Republicans still try to act like they're the party of the workers and that they're looking out for the little guy, Trump specifically. For some reason or somehow, he's convinced people who are working class Americans that he's one of them and that he's looking out for them. And it really doesn't make any sense. And then on top of that, the Republicans actively deny climate change, even despite the fact that we're all hot. We're hot everywhere in this country, right? I know I live in Texas and I know I'm hotter than the weather here is hotter than the rest of the country, but it's ridiculous, and we're all feeling it, and they're denying it. They're gaslighting us, telling us it's not a thing, and it is a thing, and people are going to die because of it. But anyway, with that, that's it for the main show. We'll see you in the bonus.